Now we're going to talk about Chapter 8, and this is on credentialing. So, credentialing and counseling in related fields. So, it's relatively new in the helping profession, credentialing is, and it did not become common until the 1900s, and it became a reality in the counseling field in the 1970s. The benefits of credentialing is increased professionalism. It kind of lets the public know that we have standards, we have hoops to jump through, basically. You can't just walk in off the street and sign up and be a counselor. So, increased professionalism, demonstrating expertise, parity, saying we're just as good as social workers, psychologists, right? We can practice clinically and protection of the public. So the reason we have the hoops there is so that you are competent and that you aren't causing any harm, and that you are actually helping people. So that is the purpose of credentialing. So there are a few types of credentialing. The first one is not very common. I haven't heard a lot about this one. It's registration. It's the simplest form of credentialing. It involves listing the members of a particular professional group, generally regulated by each state. It implies members have acquired minimal competence in their professional area. Now, play therapy, their credential is RPT, which it stands for Registered Play Therapist. But I think it's more of more of a certification because it is a pretty rigorous process to get that credential. But registration is the first type. The next one is certification. This is really where I think play therapy falls under because it's a formal recognition that individuals within a professional group have met certain predetermined standards of professionalism. It's more rigorous than registration, but less rigorous than licensure, generally seen as a protection of a title. Certification, you'll see all over the place. You could be a certified EMDR therapist, a certified EFT therapist. So I've got training. So to work at my practice, you have to be trained in emotionally focused couples therapy, or EFT, EFCT, really, if you get technical, but EFT. Um, and you have the option to get certified. You have to go through all the training, which I've gone to. It's about 3 weeks of intense training. And then you have supervised hours, which I do. And then you have to turn in a perfect tape showing stage one and a perfect tape showing stage two. I have not gotten my perfect tape yet. But that is sort of the process. And it's pretty rigorous, it's pretty intense. And when I become a certified EFT, therapist, then you will know I really did something. So that's certification. That's an example of certification. And then licensure is the most rigorous form of credentialing. It shows that an individual has met rigorous standards, that a non-licensed individual cannot practice in that particular profession. So if you don't have a license in counseling, you cannot practice as a counselor, at least not in the state of Mississippi, as far as I know. So certifications. So I mentioned certifications. I mentioned EFT, and EMDR, but these are some other certifications that are available for counselors. You could be a certified rehabilitation counselor or a CRC through the Commission of Rehabilitation Counselors, CRCC. The National Certified Counselor, or the NCC. You'll see a lot of that. That's behind a lot of counselors' names, is the NCC. That's one of the first things you can get after you take the NCE, the National Counselor Exam. And that's through the National Board of Certified Counselors. Some subspecialties of that NCC credential are a Certified Clinical Mental Health Counselor, or the CCMHC. I know some people at agencies practice under this credential instead of going the licensure route. I'm not sure why, but that's a thing. But I think it's just more of an extra thing to have to show like kind of where you align. There's also the National Certified School Counselor, NCSC. You may have noticed that credential behind Dr. McCormick's name when I had their pictures and credentials up the other night. So she mentioned that she used to be a school counselor and she has maintained that credential, that NCSC. You can also get a Master of Addictions counselor. And I think at Oxford Treatment Center, they require you to get this credential when you start working there, even before you're licensed. So, um, National Credentialing Academy, they have the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors. You can become a certified family therapist. And that IAMFC, that is the branch under the umbrella of ACA. So if you're interested in that, that's the one to join. I actually joined us last year, and I was set to present and attend the schedule or the conference this past year, and then we got iced in, so I couldn't go. So nothing to report there. Maybe next year. All right. Credentialing for counselors continued. Counselor licensure. So all 50 states plus Puerto Rico, and this is just within the last, I mean, this is pretty recent. I say it's recent because I was still a student and not all states were had the LPC credential, and now everybody's got it plus Puerto Rico. So state licensure processes are usually about 60. You have to have 60 credit hours of education, 2 years of postmaster's supervision, supervised experience, give or take, and you have to take some sort of exam. And I'm going to break this down for what it looks like for the state of Mississippi here in a little bit. But that is across the board. That's usually what it takes. It's some states require maybe extra courses and some things or extra hours or fewer hours. But pretty much this is what it looks like. And then the your licensure, it also the board, your state board will be lobbying for credentialing and counseling related issues. So your dues that you pay, it's $220 to maintain your licensure. It hurts every other year I have to pay it. But those dues pay to lobby for professional organizations. They help make this happen. So we've talked about that to make sure that we're allowed in spaces that social workers and psychologists are allowed. It took us a while to be allowed to work with the military and work with the VA and get on TRICARE insurance. And so things like that is what when we talk about lobbying for our issues, those are kind of the things, is just making us accessible and available to potential clients. All right, so some more credentialing in other professions. You've got social work. You can just kind of see there, and psychology, all the different little letters they have behind their name. Marriage and family, I mentioned earlier, the IAMFC, that's what you as a counselor would seek if you're interested in going that route. Psychiatrists, we talked about how they are licensed physicians in their state and then they become board certified in their specialty area. So they are actual physicians, medical doctors. And then, of course, psychiatric mental health nurse, they've got their own thing too. So just to show you that my point in showing you this slide is that most professions have some kind of credentialing to allow them to practice. All right. And I just mentioned lobbying for credentialing and counseling related issues and how those fees go towards that. So, becoming licensed in Mississippi, and this is as of 2025, an overview of the licensure types. Not all states have a tiered licensure like we do, and we haven't always had a tier licensure system. We didn't get this until 2018, the PLPC, this provisional licensed professional counselor. Um, when I graduated with my master's, all I got was that NCC credential, and I was just practicing under a supervisor. I didn't have any kind of licensure. I was just considered, I guess, a practicing intern, I guess. So it is good. This is a good thing that we've moved in this direction to cover that gap between graduation and full licensure. So that gap between graduation and full licensure is where you have the PLPC, and that's your supervised practice. Once you do all of that post graduation, you have that practice, then you apply for the LPC, Licensed Professional Counselor, and that's your independent practice. You can go hang your own shingle and open your own independent practice by yourself, and you don't have to have any supervisors. But just like Dr. McCormick mentioned, it is a very good idea to always keep a supervisor. I even have a supervisor and I'm an LPCS. I am a supervisor and I have a supervisor. So it's just good. You can never have too much consultation. Let me just, throw that in there. But anyway, it's not required supervision is not required for LPC. You're an independent practitioner. Then you can stop there and just do that for the rest of your career. You can just be an LPC. But if you want to become a supervisor and the state needs supervisors, it seems like there are not enough supervisors to go around. Sometimes people have a hard time finding a supervisor. I would suggest that you go ahead and become an LPCS or a board qualified supervisor. So we'll talk about kind of what each type looks like along the way and how to get there. So the educational requirements are a graduate degree, at least 60 hours from a regionally or nationally accredited institution. And so, congrats, you're doing that. You're getting your 60 hours. And this is like saying that the University of Mississippi is accredited and the School of Education is accredited by CAPE. And then, even more so, we're accredited by KCREP. So, you've got accreditation covered, and that is approved by the board. And then you have to have coursework in 12 areas. This might be familiar to you. It looks very similar to the foundational curriculum that KCREP requires. And so that's really nice that it all lines up. You don't have to come from a KCREP accredited program as long as your program has the word counselor in it or counseling in it. And I think this rule was made in 2017. So it either has to have the name counseling in it or it has to be a KCREP accredited program. And that's just a Mississippi law. Um, but it used to be it didn't matter if it was K-CREP accredited or not. It was preferred, but you had to have these 12 areas. And by being a K-CREP accredited program, by default, you're going to have all these 12 areas because they align with those foundational curriculum areas. So I'm hoping that you're connecting the dots. Why do I have to even know or care about K-CREP? And this is why, because you need to be licensed in order to practice. Um, and this is what is required. So these are the educational requirements. All right. Provisional licensure, PLPC. Now remember, school counselors, once you graduate, you qualify for this too, because if you notice on those educational requirements back here, well, now it's taking me forward. Back here, um, we've set up the curriculum that you have all these classes too. So that's why you have the option to either do school or clinical to do the LPC. Now, provisional licensure, PLPC, the application plus fee is $50 to apply for PLPC. Then you've got to have your official transcripts showing that you've got your master's degree. You have to pass a jurisprudence exam, which I always think this one is pretty easy because it's just about ethics. And so if you know your ethics, then you will do well on this exam every year. You have to take it periodically to maintain your licensure too, but so the jurisprudence exam is your ethics exam. And then you have to pass a background check, which is $50. I'm not sure if that's an extra $50 or if that is what the fee is for. I think it might be an extra $50, but you got to pass a background check. And we've had some students like have issues with this before, like if they had, when they were in college and maybe got a DUI or something like that. They made a mistake when they were young and they had something on their record. It doesn't count you out, but there are extra hoops to jump through. So it's similar to like if you're trying to become a lawyer, you've got to have a pretty clean record. So you got to pass a background check. A supervision contract with a board qualified supervisor, an LPCS. So you've got to find one and get a contract with them, and then you upload it. I think your supervisor uploads it to the portal. Everything's done online now. It used to be done on paper, and it was a nightmare. So it's really now when I supervise people for licensure, it's so much easier because it's all done online. So you upload that contract. That your supervisor has, like I have one that I just pull and I use for everybody. As an LPCS, I have that, that's already been approved by the board. So then you have to do a declaration of practice, and that's what you have to do. You have to come up with a declaration of practice, and you can ask about that. Whoever teaches you foundations can kind of help you with that. And your supervisor can help you draft that too, but it's basically just kind of saying what you will be doing and things like that. So duties under a PLPC is you practice under supervision until your LPC requirements are met. And that usually takes 18 months to a couple years, couple few years. So for Mississippi, like I said, it varies state to state a little bit. Mississippi is one of the more rigorous states, and we require 3,000 hours of a postmaster's supervised experience over at least 18 months. So you can't just fly through them. I mean, that's going pretty hard in 18 months, but you cannot do it in any shorter amount of time. So over at least 18 months, I think it takes most people about 2 years, maybe three but 2 years I think is pretty average. Of those hours, at least 1,200 have to be direct client services and psychotherapy or slash psychotherapy. There's that word again, and this is directly from the bylaws from the Mississippi LPC. So, but at least 1,200 hours of face-to-face contact with clients and then 100 hours of individual face-to-face supervision. And there's like little ticky rules that your supervisor will help you with, but you can only have 1 hour per 40 hours of services or 1 hour per 25 hours of direct contact hours. And if you are working part-time, the frequency of your supervision has to be at least every other week. So they're real ticky about the supervision. So make sure you and your supervisor work together and have a good little schedule. And then group supervision is allowed, but it counts only towards a portion. You can only count group supervision towards half of those 100 hours. And so the specific ratios, right? Only 1 hour 2 hours of group supervision counts as 1 hour of individual supervision. So you would have to count towards half of your 100 hours. If let's say you had 50 group supervision hours, that's really only going to count towards 25. You report all the hours and the board does the math. So anyway, you don't have to memorize all of this. It's just there's little specific rules about your supervision and your hours and things like that. And your supervisor is there to help you with that along the way. All right, and examination requirements. So the exams you must pass either the National Counselor exam or the NCE. You'll hear us talk about the NCE through this program, or the National Clinical Mental Health Counseling exam or the NCMHCE. And that one is a little more challenging. They used to require both, and thank goodness they only require one. The National Counselor exam is pretty much mirrors your CPCE, which is your comprehensive exam. That's the counselor preparation comprehensive exam. That's a standardized test that's required of you to exit the program, and you take that in February of your second year. And I think we've talked about that. If we haven't, let's talk about it in class. Remind me to talk about it in class. But you do have to take a comprehensive exam to graduate, and that exam is very similar to the NCE. So if saying all that to say, if you can pass the CPCE, go ahead and take the NCE while it's fresh because you can pass the NCE if you can pass the other one. The NCMHCE I've taken a practice exam of this. It's fun to take because it gives you a vignette and then you have to kind of diagnose and make recommendations and there's multiple answers. And then if you get a wrong answer, they will deduct points. And so you get scored along the way. And so then whatever you answer determines the next question they give you. So it's really complicated. It's a little more difficult. And I enjoyed taking it just because it was just low stakes and I just took it because I wanted to see what my students had to go through when they required this. And it is tricky. So good thing you don't have to take it. Take that NCE. So the exams can be taken before completing all your supervised hours. You just need to take it somewhere along the way. And I suggest taking it while it's fresh and you're in school. So like take it, and you're responsible for signing up for the NCE because it's not required for graduation. It's not part of the program. So we can't make you take it. And we don't sign you up for it. Like I'll sign you up for your comprehensive exam, the CPCE. I will sign you up for that, but you are responsible for signing up for the NCE, and you can take that. Most people take it like in April or May around the time they graduate. So that's what that looks like. Then you get it out of the way. And then from PLPC to LPC, you just have to maintain supervision and continue accruing required supervised experience hours. There is like a weird window where you've gotten all your hours and you're with your supervisor and you've turned all your paperwork in, and then you have to wait on the board to meet. And that might be a month from when you turn your paperwork in. You have to continue meeting with your supervisor because you can't practice independently yet. So once all your required supervised hours, direct service, supervision, all that good stuff is met, then you apply. So, well, and then I said there's that weird window. Then there's like other documentation, like evaluation of supervision, like did you have a good experience? That helps the board, I think, maintain, quality LPCSs or qualified supervisors. And then verification of to make sure you passed your tests and everything like that. And then, of course, it costs $220 to apply for the LPC. And then you have to pay that big fat check every 2 years to maintain it. It's every other June. It's like June 30th every other year. So there's a group that goes on the odd years and a group that goes on the even years. And then in between, during those 2 years, you have to get 25 continuing education hours. And you can get those. Most people get them at the conferences, go to MCA, get them at a conference. You can go, we have local stuff happen sometimes. Sometimes we even host programs that offer CEs, and you can get them online. A lot of people get them online through all those associations that we've talked about. So ACA or CSI, things like that. So that is how you transition from PLPC to LPC. And then once you're an LPC, if you decide to become a board qualified supervisor, add that little S at the end of your licensure. You have to be already an LPC in good standing with at least 5 years of practice in mental health counseling, and at least 2 of those years have to be post licensure. So you can count some of the work that you've done. The work that you've done, that supervised work under PLPC, that counts. And then when you get licensed, you have to have at least 2 more years. And so, and then in addition to that, you have to have supervision education. And so, like I'm an LPCS, and I got that in my doctorate program because we had a course in supervision, and we had way enough. So I think for Mississippi, it's 30 clock hours. So if you're getting a doctorate, you might as well become an LPCS because you're going to have all this lined up and in place. And then you just pay when you renew your LPC, you just pay an extra $50 and keep that S on the end of it. And that's your LPCS. And you can help other practitioners, become fully licensed. And it's a pretty cool thing to do. So an activity that I'd like us to do in class, so just kind of be prepared for it, is in groups, we'll assign different states. So I went over Mississippi, and I want y'all to pick some different states. Maybe think of a state you'd be interested in moving to. If you could move anywhere, would you want to go? And I want you to explore what the coursework is, the testing, how many hours of supervision do you need? What does that look like? How much does it cost? And any other little details that we might need to know if we wanted to move to that state and become licensed. Now, let's talk about licensure portability and the counseling compact. So portability means it's the process of transferring your LPC license to another state to practice there. So that would just mean I've done all that rigmarole to get this LPC in Mississippi, and let's say I want to move to Montana, and I have some portability, and I just take my licensure and I go up there, and they see me as a fully licensed counselor. We're not exactly there yet. That's where we are headed. That's where we want to be. That if you're licensed in one state, you're licensed in all of them, because we aren't practicing state-specific counseling. CACREP is the gold standard. It's practiced all over. That's done all over the country. So why do we have individual, state licensures, I think is the question. So what we're trying to do through the counseling compact is achieve that. And what that means is you have an agreement between participating states. So not all 50 states, participate. And it grants you a privilege to practice across state lines using your home state license. And this is good too if you move around, like if you have a spouse in the military and you kind of move around or something like that, you can you can do telehealth in multiple states. So you might see some in-person clients in Mississippi, but also can, see some telehealth clients in other states where you kind of register with them and you have that privilege to practice using your home state license. So that's the counseling compact. Reciprocity is when you apply for new license in the destination state by using your existing qualifications. This is what I did when I moved to Idaho several years ago for my doctorate. I was able to get reciprocity and I didn't have to start over. Some states, a lot of states used to make you just start over. No, that license doesn't count in the state. You have to start your hours over at zero and get a licensure and go through the whole process again. But there were some states, and it's probably the same states who jumped on this counseling compact, early on that had this reciprocity where they would look and see what you've already done and they would count that towards your licensure in the new state. So it's more paperwork, and it's a whole thing, but it's important. It's important. You have to have it to be able to practice. So the portability, we're not there. The counseling compact is our vehicle, and reciprocity also exists, but counseling compact is really where it's at right now. And I'm going to show you a map of which states participate. So the dark blue are all participating. Look at us, Mississippi, we're in it. It's most of the states, not all of them. Texas, California, those are humongous states that aren't participating. I'm surprised that Idaho is not participating because I learned about portability and the compact and everything from um, my program up there, and they were on board. The counselor educators were on board, and they're involved in the state. So it's surprising, but they have reciprocity, so maybe that's why they didn't jump on the compact. I don't know. But then there's uh the light blue, you can see there's legislation filed. So these other states are working towards it, but there's other states that haven't filed any. And again, this is as of 2025. But you can go to this website up here in the top right corner, counselingcompact.gov/map, to get the most up-to-date information on which states are participating in the compact. But this is a really cool thing. This is something that people in the profession have wanted for a really long time. And it helps makes us accessible to potential clients, people who need help. It lets us help people. And that's the whole point, right? Okay. So that's all I have for credentialing. And don't forget to take your quiz and do your reflections, and I'll see you in class.